The first pasuk reads, "Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe me'el Lemor." The word Lemor means tell them over, to say over. So Rashi over here explains what is Lemor. Say ve'emul divrei kavushim. Go and tell them words which are encapturing. What is that? B'shulchem hu nidbarimi. The only reason why I am worthy that Hashem should have this personal communication with me is only because I represent you. If I would not represent you, God would not have this level of communication. That's divrei kavushin. You know, the Gemara tells us, we find that the Torah tells us there are 4 rivers that went out of Gan Eden. And the Euphrates, which is known as the Pras, is one of those rivers. It's not the largest of the rivers, but yet the Pras is referred to in the Torah as Hanor HaGadol Nar Pras, the great Euphrates, the river which is Euphrates. So the Gemara asks, if it was not the largest of the 4 rivers that came out of Gan Eden, why is it referred to as the greatest river? So the more answer is that because it flows by Eretz Yisrael, and it's no different if you have an ambassador who represents the greatest monarch in the world, although he may be an ordinary person, but because of his level of relationship and representation and association is with the greatest monarch, therefore he takes on that special status. So because the Euphrates is the only river which flows by Eretz Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael is the Holy Land, that's Hashem's location. Therefore, although the Pras in its own right may not be the largest river, but in terms of its innate value, because of its association with Eretz Yisrael, therefore it's called Hanar HaGodel. It's the great river Pras, the great Euphrates. Lamor, whatever Moshe is, Nachnu Mo, I am, what am I? Negated himself, there wasn't a trace of himself. Even at that level, he was not worthy to receive this level of communication. It's only because he represents Klal Yisrael, so his value is he's the representative of who they are. Therefore, Hashem is having this level of communication with me to give over to you, to give you an understanding of what your value is. But let's understand what it is. We'd mentioned just a few days ago, whenever the Torah speaks about kores, spiritual excision, you're being excised from God. But the Torah never says, that soul will be cut off from God. It's either one of 2 ways the Torah expresses itself. That soul will be cut off from Israel, or will be cut off from its people. But if in fact, what it means is you have no relation with Hashem any longer, why doesn't it say, Hashem? So we explained that Hashem has no relationship with individuals. If you're part of the whole, God has a relationship with you. If you're not part of the whole, he has no relation with you, regardless of who you are. Meaning, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which pre-existed Klal Yisrael, Chazal tell us, Hein Merkava. They were the chariot, they were the location in existence for Hashem's presence. They were the equivalent of the Kodesh Kadoshim, of the Holy of Holies. Once there's a Klal Yisrael, and God took us to be his people, and we became the Goy Kadosh, the holy people, God's relationship is only with this Goy, with this nation, which is called Bnei Yisrael. He has no relation with anyone else. If you're part of the whole, he has a relation with you. If you're not part of the whole, he has no relationship with you. Therefore, whenever the Torah speaks of kores, you're being excised from God. If you're excised from Amel, you're not seen as part of the people any longer. Whether it's Amel or Yisrael, you basically have no relation with God. And we showed from the Rambam that the Rambam writes in Yesodei HaTorah that a person who's porishmin at Tzibur, he separates himself from the Jewish community. What does that mean? It means he keeps the Torah meticulously, but he says the problems of Klal Yisrael are not his problems, and the successes of Klal Yisrael are not his successes. He exists as an independent person. He doesn't identify with Klal Yisrael, although he keeps the mitzvahs. Rambam says, "Ein lo chet l'mabo." He has no share in the world to come. So the question is, but in fact, if he's keeping the Torah meticulously, so maybe the mitzvah of V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, that mitzvah he's not keeping, but everything else he keeps. So why? Because he sees himself not as part. Why doesn't he have a share in the world to come? The answer is because God has no relationship with individuals. If you're part of the whole, you have a relationship with Hashem. If you're not part of the whole, you don't. Lamor, as great as Moshe Rabbeinu was, once there's a Klal Yisrael, the only one God has a relationship with is Klal Yisrael. So why does he have this intimate relationship with Moshe? The answer is because he represents Klal Yisrael. Therefore, he's saying, Lamor, tell them over, let them understand, why do I have this intimate communication with Hashem? It's Lamor, it's only because I represent you. Because I'm part of the whole, therefore I have relevance to this. But if I would not be part of the whole, as great as I may be, I have no relation with God. That's Divrei Kavushim. Those are in capturing words for us to understand who we are, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu, as great as he is, that's why he only has that level of connection to Hashem.
What are we to make of the fact that Hashem wanted to destroy us and restart a new nation with Moshe?
Okay. Because of the Chet Egel, Hashem says, let me destroy them. Now we'll start all over again. Moshe Rabbeinu says, if you take a look, Rashi cites the Midrash, he says, if a structure, if a chair, which has 3 legs, it's not able to withstand all time, all challenges, and ultimately it's going to be destroyed. A nation that stands on 1 leg, could it withstand all the challenges of time? Meaning, Klal Yisrael have the schus of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the merit of the 3 patriarchs. That's the foundation of Klal Yisrael. And after everything's said and done, you're going to destroy them. So if you start a new nation from me, and the basis for their existence is myself, do they have a chance to survive? Therefore, forgive them. That was the supplication of Moshe Rabbeinu. Therefore, I don't think you should even consider myself, because it's a no-go. It's not going to work. And then he began supplicating Hashem that he should forgive the Jewish people. But that was the point over there. The only reason why he would have any value is because God is starting all over. You'll be the new nation. Again, he has a relationship with the nation. Since you will be the equivalent of the new nation, I have a relationship with you. But at this point, there is the Klal Yisrael. The only reason why I have the relationship with you, as special as you are, is only because you're part of the whole. The second point. Gabriel b'nei Yisov amarta aleim. Odom ki Yaakov ish. Yaakov became korban l'Hashem. Odom ki Yaakov. Throughout the Torah, whenever it speaks about a person having an obligation, and even regarding korbanos, it says ish ki Yaakov. Ish, a person. Here, when we speak about introducing korbanos, Torah uses the term Odom ki Yaakov, which is unusual. And Rashi cites a Chazal, but there's mentioned Chumah that explains it differently. Min ha-behema, min ha-bokor, min ha-tzon takriv korbanchem. From the behema, it has to be domesticated. It's the cattle, the sheep. You should sacrifice your sacrifice. Let's take a look, Rashi. Odom ki yakriv mikem, kishi yakriv bekorbanos nedova divra inyan. We're speaking about voluntary korbanos. We're not speaking about the communal offerings, which are obligatory. Or later we speak about the sin offering, the guilt offering. We're speaking about Ola and Shlomim. The burnt offering, which could be brought voluntarily, or the peace offering. When you bring them, Odom, Lom and Nemar. Why does it say Odom? Why not Ish? Ma Odom Rishon Lohikriv min HaGezel. Just as Odom, it says the first day he was created, he brought a korban. And just like when Odom brought the korban, it was not from stolen property. Why? Shakol ho yeshelo, because the whole world belonged to him. Avatem lo sekriv min HaGezel. if the animal is stolen, it does not qualify. That korban, that sacrifice is considered an abomination to God. You have to be the sole owner, and it has to come from a kosher source. Habehemo. What is habehemo? Yochel af chai bechlal. Maybe even a kosher, undomesticated animal. Talmud lo bulk of its own. No. Normally, behema could include all kosher, all species. But now the Torah goes to specify what is the nature of this behema, min haboka min hatzon, the cattle and the sheep, which means it's domesticated. Min habehema, what's from the behema? Velo kulo. Not every domesticated species is qualified. We'll see. Even the species, which is normally lotzis or revea vesanirva. But let's say somebody had committed bestiality with the animal, that animal is disqualified. Min habokar, of the bokar, lotzi es hanevad. If somebody had bowed, had worshipped the animal, will go on for chulin, for ordinary usage. It's permitted, but for a korban, it's considered tainted. Min hatzon, lotzi es hamuktzah. What about a person designates an animal to be used for idolatry? It wasn't yet worshipped. Even the designation alone is enough to disqualify the animal, that the animal cannot be used for a korban. Uminat son, uminat lotzi es hanogeach shehimis. What about if you have the animal it gored and killed? Okay. Now the Gemara tells us, normally to establish an animal as a gora, to be stoned, to be put to death, what do you have to do? You have to have two witnesses. What about if you have a single witness? A single witness is not believed. It's not evidence. What about if a person himself would admit the animal gored? Normally, if you admit yourself, it's gored. It's your money. But yet, the animal itself is not put to death. It has to come through the testimony of two witnesses. But in terms of korban, if the owner himself says this animal gored and killed, the animal cannot be used as a korban. For ordinary usage, for regular consumption, it doesn't assume the status of an animal that gored. The court will not rule on it that it should be put to death and becomes Isur no. But for a single witness, a three-own admission, that's enough to disqualify it. It cannot be used as a korban. Takrivu, malamed shishnaim isnad olo b'shutvis. Takrivu is plural, to tell me that you can bring a voluntary offering as a partnership. See, the halacha is a communal offering is not a partnership. Communal offering means it represents the community. Although all communal offerings were brought from the Machzah Shekel, every Jew participated, but it's not a partnership. What's proof in the pudding that it's not a partnership? Because let's say you would send your Machzah Shekel, that endless half silver coins coming in, and they would, it's called Trumas Alishko, they would tithe the room which the coins were kept, and they would fill up boxes, 3 boxes, and they used the coins from those boxes to purchase the communal offerings throughout the year. I mean, if your coin was not in that box, did you have a share in that communal offering? The answer is yes, because that korban represented the tzibur. Shurtvis means I have an innate ownership as an owner, monetary ownership in it. A korban tzibur is not any individual has an interest as an individual. It's Klal Yisrael's korban. It's the sacrifice of Klal Yisrael. So a voluntary offering can be brought in a dover as shutfim, partners. A communal offering cannot be brought. Now, so Rashi says, why does Torah use the term Adam? That if it's stolen, it doesn't qualify as a korban. Just as Adam, when he was created, he was the sole owner of existence, and the concept of theft had no relevance. Identically, when you bring the carbon, it has to have that kind of profile. It has no relevance to being stolen property. The mention Chumash says this: we find that Adam ate of the Eitz Hadas, and after he ate of the Eitz Hadas, he wasn't given a chance to bring a korban to atone. Right? He immediately was driven out of Gan Eden. He was told, the day that you eat, you will die. And as a result of that, he couldn't be in the Gan Eden. He was driven out of the Gan Eden, he and Chava. So the question is, why didn't he bring a korban? The answer is very simple. I mean, what I would say is because if you violate anything on a deliberate level, where you're fully aware of the liability, which is called mezid, one doesn't bring a korban. Person violates Shabbos deliberately. Even if he wasn't forewarned, one doesn't bring a chatos. You only bring a chatos, it was inadvertent. Adam's sin was deliberate. He knew he was eating of the Eitz Hadas and he ate. Although he knew Hashem had said, you're not permitted, he ate it. As a result of that, there's no atonement. He's not able to bring a korban. Adam. Now, the question is this is the Medrash Tanchuma. We are the sense of Adam, but because we're the sense of Adam, therefore, our level of understanding is very limited, especially when it comes to spirituality. Because we ourselves are tainted because of the Eitz Hadas. Because of that, we have relevance to bring a korban because the word inadvertent has relevance to us. The word inadvertent had no relevance. Everything was so absolute, clear to him. Any crossing of any line to any degree was considered deliberate. As a result of that, he's not eligible to bring the korban. We, because we are his descendants, and we're tainted, and we have short memories. As a result of that, therefore, the concept of shogeg has relevance to us. Inadvertent, therefore we bring the korban. We had once discussed at the time of the Shvius Haluchos, when the tablets were broken, the Gemara tells us that as they were broken, the letters that were a fire, they floated heavenward. The letters that were etched onto the Luchos Rishonos, the first tablets, they floated upward. What was the symbolism of the letters detaching to floating upward? So Chazal tell us that Shikchas HaTorah, forgetting, it totally like evaporates. The letters that were blatantly clear and blazoned on the Luchos, when they were smashed, they ascended. They disappeared. That's the basis for the forgetting of Torah. That's what because the Chazal say if Moshe wouldn't have broken the Luchos, the Torah would have never been forgotten from us. Anything you study remains etched in your neshama, in your memory. But because Moshe broke the Luchos, therefore there's forgetting, and therefore we have to continuously review. Ongoing review and review. Otherwise, we wouldn't have forgotten. Now, why was the breaking of the Luchos the basis for forgetting? Otherwise, we wouldn't have forgotten the Torah. Okay? The Gemara tells us in Psachim that forgetting is a gift. That a person forgets is a gift. It's a gift of Hashem. Why is it a gift? Because if a person would not forget, and a person loses a loved one when they die, the pain would be so not contendable, you wouldn't survive that pain. And eventually you would die from it. Or it would infringe on your function, you couldn't exist. The pain of losing a loved one. Even though a person may vividly remember everything, but as we say, time heals. As time passes, there is a forgetting process. It's not as painful, or it's not like the first moment. If there wouldn't be forgetting, it's like the first moment. The first moment would be eternal. To survive that first moment eternally, you couldn't survive it. Therefore, Hashem gave forgetting as a gift to humanity, that humanity could go on. Otherwise, you couldn't continue. That's the Gemara Pesachim. So what I said was that if we wouldn't have violated done the Chet Egel, it says explicitly in the Gemara, we reverted back to pre-sin of Adam. Now, if Adam would have eaten of the Eitz Hadas, of the tree of knowledge, what would have been? Death would have had no relevance to existence. The only reason why we need forgetting is because there's such a thing as death. So to be able to survive that experience of death of a loved one, we have to have forgetting. But if we ourselves reverted back to pre-sin, and we were no longer subject to death, there's no reason to forget any longer. As a result of that, the Torah we would study, we'd remember. But as a result of the Chet Egel, Moshe broke the Luchos. And as a result of that, because that's the only way God wouldn't have destroyed us, so we reverted back to post-sin. Once you go revert back to post-sin, we're back to the death experience. For that the experience, you need forgetting. Once you have forgetting, you forget the Torah. Because it's one state of being. As a result of that, therefore, you have to continuously review, otherwise you would forget. But therefore, Brega Luchos is synonymous with forgetting. Okay? But as I was speaking, I was thinking, if not for the Chet, the sin of the golden calf, the world would have reached its level of perfection. There's a mitzvah of Gisbo Yom V'Loila. There's a mitzvah to study Torah continuously, day and night. Why? Because the Gemara tells us in two locations, Barasi Yitzhar Barasi Lo Torah Tavli. I've created evil inclination. I've created for it specifically the Torah as its antidote. The only way you're able to incapacitate evil inclination is only with the study of Torah. If the Jews wouldn't have sinned with the Chet Egel, we reached the level of perfection, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination would have been destroyed. So the Torah is no longer an antidote. You don't have to have that same level of continuous study. You only need that continuous study to counter the machinations of the evil inclination. But if we would have sinned with the Eitz Hadas, with the Chet Egel, which brought us to post-sin of the tree of knowledge, there wouldn't have been a Yetzer Hara. If that's the case, there's no forgetting. There's no reason to forget. You only forget so you should continue to be involved in the process of studying Torah. Because it's a survival technique. Without it, you can't survive. But if we went to sin with the Eitz Hadas, you survive because you don't have to contend with the Yetzer Hara. As a result of that, there's no reason to forget any longer. That's what I was thinking.
Also, every
Rambam writes in Hilchos Talmud Torah that a person has an obligation to study till the last moment of his life. Why? Because the Torah says you're not permitted to forget the Torah. When you study, you're not permitted to forget it. So therefore he says, you must study until the last moment of your life, because the moment you stop studying, you begin forgetting. Those are the words of Rambam. Meaning, every moment that you detach, if you're not fully involved, the forgetting process starts. You may not realize it. Let's say a person has a vivid memory. Literally, deja vu, he could literally see himself at the funeral time and everything. It's still not the same as the moment that it happened. It starts, the evaporation process starts, the forgetting process starts immediately. Therefore, the Rambam says the reason why you have to continuously involve and study to the last moment, because Torah says you're not permitted to forget, that's a Torah violation. So by not stopping, it doesn't allow that process to start. And even if it does, because you're engaged, you don't forget. Those are words of Rambam.
So is there some non-earthly component to this? Meaning, let's take you, for example. I don't know when the last time you studied Chulin was. I'm just making it up, right? Maybe it was 3 years ago or 8 years ago. What is the...
I beginning Parshas Truma, Hashem says, "V'chuli truma." Take for me a tithing. And the Medrash cites the pasuk in Nishlei, Ki lekach tov nosati lechem torasei tozavu. I've given you a good commodity, my Torah, don't abandon it. Appreciate what it is, don't abandon it. And the Medrash says, what is it analogous to? You have merchants. One has silk, one has spices. And each one wants the other commodity. And they exchange. So the silk merchant says, I'll give you my silk, you give me your spices, and you give, the one says, who has the spices, you give me your silk, and I'll give you my spices. So what happens? Initially, although each one had whatever they initially had, but once they make the exchange, the one who had the silk no longer has the silk, and the one who had the spice no longer has the spices. When it comes to Torah, a person knows Seder Moed, another person knows Seder Nezikin. And the one who studies Nezikin says, I will teach you Moed, and the one who says, knows Moed says, I'll teach you Nezikin. At the end of the day, they have two Sidorim. They have two sections of Shas. So isn't it a phenomenal commodity? When you exchange, it's not an exchange, but you add. That's the Midrash. So I asked the question, the obvious question. So that's true with any branch of knowledge. You know physics, I know medicine. As a physicist, you can teach me, and I have the capacity to be able to understand, to become a physicist. And you have the capacity to become a doctor. I'll teach you medicine, you teach me physics. And therefore, it's same thing. So now you're a physicist who happens to be a doctor. Well, it's true, when you're dealing with a commodity, once you give it up, you no longer have it. But any branch of knowledge, when you share with the other person, now the person has both branches of knowledge. Why is it only by Torah? It's an obvious question. So what I answered was exactly what we're saying now. We're studying now Bava Metzia. We're not studying Chulin. So the question is, if you're detached from Chulin, so you should begin forgetting Chulin. Or any other part of Shas that at one time you studied and you knew very well. Because you haven't been engaged, you haven't engaged in a while, whatever that is. This is the difference. According to Rambam, the moment you detach yourself from Torah, you begin forgetting. The Torah in entirety is all. What about when you study one page and now you're on another page? You're no longer attached to the previous page or the previous subject matter, even within the same Masech, the same tractate. So you're forgetting? The answer is no. You're still connected. It's all one Torah. As long as you're engaging in Torah, you're still attached to it. You haven't detached. It's the detachment which causes you to forget. When you study physics, the time I have to take out to study from medicine, I'm studying physics, I'm detaching myself from medicine. So there's a degree of forgetting. You're no longer that knowledge is no longer intact as originally was intact. Because the moment you stop, you disengage from anything, you begin forgetting. That's the nature of forgetting. So if you detach from Torah, it's true, you forget. But as long as you're still involved in Torah, whether it's Bava Metzia, Shabbos, or Chulin, it's all the same. And since you haven't detached, therefore, as a result of this, you're still involved, therefore you won't forget. The Siyata Dishmaya, as Alan said, Moshe Rabbeinu was taught that the faculty of the brain is not the faculty which allows you to comprehend and retain. It's all Siyata Dishmaya. That's what it is.
So
You can be
that's
as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. It's only if you follow the process do you merit that divine assistance to be able to retain it. So as long as you follow the protocol, the same idea. As long as you're involved in Torah, you merit the Siyat Dishmaya, the full retention. You have retention. But if you detach, that's when you begin forgetting. But that Siyat Dishmaya doesn't apply to any other branch of knowledge. So the moment you detach from one, you're no longer there, you begin forgetting. Therefore, you're giving up something for something else. With Torah, you're not giving up anything for anything.
So if I were to ask you, and this is not obviously, Rabbi, to put you on the spot.
Two great Gaonim. They weren't just Torah sages. There was the famous Rogachover Gaon. His name was Rav Yosef Rosen. He lived in a town in Latvia called Rogachov. That's where he originally from, but he lived in Dvinsk. And you had Rameir Simcha of Dvinsk. They both lived literally across the street from one another. One was Rameir Simcha of Dvinsk, who was known as the Or Sameach, and the other one was known as the Rogachover Gaon. So this person came to ask a shaila, halacha question about how to build a mikveh in a certain way, which wasn't the regular way, would it be a valid mikveh? So he goes to the Rabbi Simcha of Dvinsk, and he poses the question. Rabbi Simcha says, "Come back in a half an hour, and I will explain it to you. I just want to think it over for a half an hour." He come back. He goes into the Rogachover. He says, "While I'm waiting, I'll go across the street. I'll go into the Rogachover. I'll ask him the question." The moment he starts asking the question, the Rogachover is already responding and gives him an immediate answer. Okay? So he has the answer from the Rogachover. He goes back to Rameir Simcha after half an hour, and literally the Rameir Simcha gives him the exact same answer verbatim what the Rogachover told him instantaneously. This person had a little bit of chutzpah, and he says to the Rameir Simcha Dvinsk, he says, "You gave me the exact same answer verbatim what the Rogachover gave me. You told me to come back in a half an hour." He immediately, before I finished asking the question, he responded. Why did it take you a half an hour? Why was he able to respond immediately? So he says, "I'll tell you the difference between myself and Rogachover Gaon. The Rogachover Gaon, he reviews the Torah in its entirety every 30 days. So for him, when you ask him any question, he's in the subject matter as you ask it. Me, it takes a few moments for me to get there. Therefore, I asked you to come back in half an hour." My Rosh Hashanah V'Rocha told me there was a story with the Rogachover Gaon. When he would say a shir, he was saying a shir in Menachos, and which is from the Seder Kochim. And he has a Gemara on his stender, on his lectern, and he has his finger on the page, and he's reading the Gemara, he's reading Tosas, this and that, and somebody takes a look at the volume, it's Masechah Sanhedrin. Hear this? It's Masechah Sanhedrin, and he's reading it off the page as if he's reading Menachos. You understand what we're talking about over here? He definitely had a photographic memory. But in addition, I mean, he didn't even see the words that were printed on the page. It's as if he was reading what he had in his mind. That's what he was reading off the page. I mean, that's that. It's true. See, these people, they didn't waste a moment. Every moment when it's fully invested, you barely have to think. It's instant recall. There's a story with the Chafetz Chaim. He was traveling with Reb Chaim Brisker on a train, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. And somebody had asked, somebody had asked both the Chafetz Chaim and Reb Chaim Brisker, how many times is something mentioned in the Shas? Okay? So Reb Chaim Brisker answered, whatever it is, 28 times. That's immediately, 28 times. Chafetz Chaim remained silent. They both get on the train, they're traveling, and after 2 hours, the Chafetz Chaim says 28 times. And he says, afterwards he shared with others, you see the difference between Reb Chaim Brisker and myself. I had to review Shas in my mind for 2 hours to establish it's only 28 times. Reb Chaim Brisker, on the spot, he said 28 times. That means the whole Shas was before his eyes. In one moment, he was able to respond. It's a different level of recall and how everything was coalesced in the Torah as one entity. Tell you
Thank you,
personal
Rabbi.
story.
I'm gonna jump down.